My name's Yaëla, Dr. Yaëla Raanan. I am um, the general director. I'm a co-general director of an organization called the Regional Council for the Unrecognized Bedouin Villages. It is not a regional council. There are regional councils in Israel. I am from Kisufim. I am part of the regional council called Eshkol. It's the way Israel gives a municipality to small communities. But these people, these Bedouins of the unrecognized villages, do not have a municipality. They are without municipality. They don't exist as villages. And so therefore they created their own NGO and called it the Regional Council for the Unrecognized Villages, as an indication of this is what we actually really want, to be recognized and to have our own municipality. So this organization was created by the leadership of these villages in 1997 and has been active since. We've had success. We started off with 45 villages in 1997 that were more than 500 people and that were not recognized. No villages were recognized then. And since then, 17 villages have been recognized. So it's a civil society activity that works. It doesn't work enough. It doesn't work completely, not yet at least, but it is a voice for these people. I will step back a bit and start explaining who these people are. What is this unrecognized village? And I would like to start off by telling you who are participating in this talk that I really appreciate it, that you are taking the time to learn about something that is slightly very distant from you, means part of the same country, but it's a different community. It is not the Jewish community. It is part of the Muslim Arab community, and it is the minority of the minority of the minority. I mean, really, you'll see soon what I'm talking about. Okay, so I will start. You probably know by now that there's about 2 million citizens of Israel who are Arabs. Okay, most call themselves Palestinians, Palestinian citizens of Israel. They are all Arabs because they all have their mother tongue as Arabic. Most are Muslim. In the south, everybody is Muslim. And in the north, you have about 15% who are Christian, different denominations of Christianity, those 15%. Of those Arabs who are citizens of Israel, okay, we also, of course, have the Arabs or the Palestinians who are not citizens of Israel, living in the West Bank and living in Gaza, in the Gaza Strip. So of the 2 million who are citizens of Israel, 350,000 more or less live in the south. Okay, so it's a percent. What percentage does it come out to be? 12, 15%, 12% of the Israeli Palestinian minority are Arabs who live in the south. In the south of Israel, the overwhelming majority of the Arabs are of Bedouin descent. Okay, now I said it correctly. They are not Bedouin anymore in the sense that their lifestyle is not very Bedouin anymore. Bedouin lifestyle that was stopped by our government when we started the country was in our area, it was called semi-nomadic, which means that they had a home that was always their home. They grew trees. No, they had, it's desert. You can't grow much trees, but you can in the wadis, in the places where the water goes during the winter. They grew fields, barley mostly, some wheat. They had some summer crops like watermelon. And in the season is like mid-winter when the grass starts to grow. They would go with their flocks and sheep and goats mostly, but also camels, a little bit of cows. They liked horses. And they would go with their animals and come back at the end of the season. That would be about 8 months. So they have a place which is home, and then they go and they come back. And why do I, in my half hour that I have, talk so in particular about this? Because it is the nomadic status. In this case, it's semi-nomadic. But the government of Israel has insisted since its beginning that the Bedouin are nomadic, and so therefore they can't claim land. Okay, so the whole story, everything that all the oppressive policies and this non-recognition is based on the premise, or it's based on the notion that the Bedouins are nomadic and so therefore never had land. In truth, everybody knows this is, I mean, the government, the courts, everybody knows this is not true. But they use it as saying, no, you can't say this land is yours, and we want you off this land, and we want you to go and move into wherever we tell you to go. And the Bedouins, on their part, say, hey, we were born here in this piece of land, in this village. And so is my father and my grandfather, my great-grandfather and his father and his father. So therefore, this is mine, and I will stay and live here. So that is the heart of the policies of non-recognition. Government says you don't, this village doesn't exist, you are nomads, get off this land. And the Bedouins say, no, it's my land, I've been here for generations upon generations. Look at the cemetery, my great-great-great-great-grandfather is buried in the cemetery. Look at the water hole that my great-great-great-great-grandfather dug so that we would have water, we could collect water. So that's the fight between the government and the Bedouins. But I still need to go a few steps back. So if we come to the Negev, to this Beersheba region, anywhere from Kiryat Gat and south, so north of Beersheba to Eilat, if we would come here before the establishment of the country, before 1948, there would be approximately 100,000 Bedouins living in this vicinity. With the War of Independence and the next few years until the early 1950s, Israel tried to get out of the area as many of these people. It was a new Jewish state. They did not want Arabs as part of the state. And so when the government of Israel started counting the Bedouin population in the 1954, there were only 12,000 Bedouin left. Okay, so most of the Bedouin that lived in the Negev before 1948, their descendants now live mostly in Jordan, in the West Bank, some in the Sinai, and those who were left were actually those, they were chosen to be those who had either helped Israel in the War of Independence, or at least did not go against Israel during the War of Independence. These people were put into a like a reservation area, if you want to think about the Indian reservations of the United States. And so they were pushed into 10% of the Negev. Government gave it a name. It was called the Siag. Siag is a word which is similar to the word reservation. It means fence, or it means border. Okay, so it's got a similar connotation. Which is about 10% of the Negev, and they just left them there, but they really wanted, the government during those years, to urbanize them all. If we look at what Moshe Dayan, who was one of the leaders in the beginning, said, let's turn them all into laborers. And every evening the men will come home and they will take off their slippers and live inside their little house, etc. And so a process of urbanization started. The government created a town called Tel Sheva. That was the first one to be created in 1969. And the government really hoped that all those Bedouins, which weren't that many in 1969, would move to Tel Sheva. It didn't work. The Bedouins did not, for them, it was a forced, urbanization, forced relocation out of their way of life, out of their culture. out of their social fabric, and a handful moved into Tel Sheva. Israel made many mistakes with Tel Sheva. For example, this is the joke we like to talk about. They had a Russian architect. Sorry, guys, this is the joke. Okay, this is the truth, but we think it's funny. They had a Russian architect who thought he knew what the Bedouin culture would need in a house. And so this Russian architect built a house that the center part did not have any kind of ceiling. He said, the Bedouins like the sun. Anyhow, it was a big failure. And when the next cities and towns were planned, the government let the Bedouins build their own homes. They didn't build homes for them. They gave them a little piece of land, a little bit of money. You build your own home. Eventually into 7 urban places. One of them is a city, 6 are towns. I'll name them because maybe you know. First one that I said was Tel Sheva. It's still a town. Then in 1974, a city was created called Rahat. Rahat has since grown to be the biggest Arab city in Israel. It became even bigger than Nazareth, which was the biggest Arab city until recently. It has about 80,000 people. And then there's another 5 smaller, towns the size of Tel Sheva. So that would be Hura, Lakia, Kseife, Segev Shalom. I'm missing one. I'll remember one. I need to put the map in my head. Okay. About half of the Bedouin population moved into these towns, into the city and towns. And 90% of those that did the moving, that moved into these places, were people that in the 50s, when Israel concentrated the Bedouins into this Siag area, they were uprooted from their traditional lands and put into the Siag. And so they were not living on their lands anyhow, and they were a lot happier when they were offered by Israel to move into an urban place, into a town, to receive their dunam or half a dunam of land and the permission to build a house and roads and running water, because that was not provided in the cities, and electricity and schools. And so almost all the people that were pushed into the Siag until the 1990s moved into these new towns. Those who didn't move were the people that had lived in their same villages, because the villages were inside the Siag. Okay, so they were not pushed onto someone else's land. They were still living on their own lands, and they did not wish to move into these towns. They didn't want to move into these towns when they were offered, and these towns have been a dismal failure in every way you can think about. You take a rural and Bedouin population, you stick them into towns which are built so wrong for this culture. I'll give you an example. I don't know if you guys have heard, but I assume that you have, about, let me see if I can do this. Blood price, I think it's called. So if somebody kills somebody, okay, then the family of the person that was killed now has to revenge his death by killing somebody within the family, extended family of the person. It's only men. A man will kill a man, then the men of the other group, other tribe, other clan, other family, it goes from small to bigger to bigger to bigger, will need to kill someone on the other from the family that killed. And this sounds like horrible. What a horrible cultural trait. But if you go back to desert days, and if you go back to large expanses, and if you go back to the time in which there was a lot of the family were tied to each other and they needed each other to survive, then people were brought up to really care about their brothers, cousins, uncles, fathers, whatever, extended family. And when somebody became angry, he knew that he would not be the one to pay the price of his anger or the actions of his anger, but rather it could be his cousin or his brother or his father. So he would not, he would be angry and walk away. And so this revenge kind of process was what kept nobody killing nobody. Okay, it was not something that created death. It was something that stopped death. And again, we're talking about a time and a place and a culture that has no police and no prisons. And so there were other laws that kept it going. Now put these people into a town or into a city, okay? And you do it not over 50 years, you do it in 1 year. And now these people move into an urban setting. There's so many things that are going on which go against their culture. First of all, there's no space. Okay, everybody's living close to everybody like you do in the city. So there's a lot more places in which you can have these altercations. Another thing is you in a city you learn to be much more of an individual because you work for yourself and not as part of this, a connected family and clan and tribe, or tribe and clan. And so you're more individualized. And another thing is when the killing happens, let's say there's this angry young man and he kills, then the men of the elders of both families can come and talk together, and there's processes to stop the killing. For example, you need to, if the killing family, the family that is responsible for the killing, okay, one of theirs is responsible, they need to move away at least 40 kilometers for at least 40 years. But where do you move when you live inside a city? So it's interesting. What they do is they put these symbolic blocks, okay, blockades on the roads. Okay, from here on, it's like 40 kilometers. Okay, it's just a blockade in a road. But this cultural trait, which kept people safe, had become a cultural trait inside a city that killed people. So this is what happens when you force a culture and a community in one, like overnight, to become an urban community. That's one thing that went wrong. And as a woman, I'd like also to add one something that, as a woman, the Bedouin women in traditional life worked very hard. They actually were the pillars of the family's economy. They built the houses, okay, they wove the tents, but the houses were theirs. And the nicer the house, the bigger the house, the more elaborate the house, it was the woman. Good job. They were in charge of the main income for the family, which was the small animals, the sheep and goats, and all the milk products. The men mostly discussed the important things in life. And they also took care of the camels in the fields. You move the women, you move the families into from the outdoors, from the living outside. Okay, there's a tent, but your life is under the sun, under the skies. You move them into a town. And I once brought a group to a woman that I really love, Hajar. And she talked to them about moving from living a traditional life into the town of Lakia. And when they asked her, what do you miss the most? And after a moment of thinking, she said, the sky. And so, it's not just killing, but you've destroyed the freedom of the women. You've destroyed the way the women receive respect among their families, among their people, because you're stuck in a house and you may not be seen and you have no role anymore. Okay, so it takes a while. This is if you live in the South, you will see many Bedouin women, young women, going to the universities. And this is their way of slowly reclaiming their place in the family, in the economy, and under the sky. So that's one thing that happened, was just the destruction of the culture and stuff. But another thing that happened was when Israel created these towns, what it did, it created sleeping places. People could go to sleep in their house, but there was no thought of how they will make a living. So initially they joined Israel in the beginning, like in the beginning of Israel, 1950s, 60s, 70s, 80s. we had a lot of industry in Israel, especially in the south. So the Bedouins went and worked in the industry, but the industry has moved to Jordan, to the Far East. I mean, it's not here anymore. And the schools have always been not good schools. And so the schooling is lousy. There is no real way of making an income, a good income, okay? An income that brings you respect. Lots of them have become truck drivers. I mean, they're looking for the places and spaces in which they can go in and make a living. But mostly they are simply poor, not well educated and poor. And so you put people into towns, you don't provide good schooling, you don't think about how to allow them to make a living, and you receive the poorest towns in Israel. And recently, you receive the poorest towns in Israel, in which the women are many of them are confined to the houses because it fits the way that they were before when they were allowed to move around. You're not allowed to be with strangers, okay? You can walk around. In the past, you were only within your family. Now everybody around you is a stranger, so there's a lot more of confining to the house. The women are more oppressed than they were traditionally, a lot more oppressed. And the young men have nothing to do. So that's the towns. And the people in the villages see what's going on in the towns and they say, oh, this is not what I want for myself. I want to be able to protect my kids. Before I go on, I would like to show two photos. May I? I'm going to show you the first photo is of a village. Hold on. It's not full. That didn't work. Hold on, let me try again. Hold on, let me try it again. Sorry, I didn't do what I wanted. And I'm doing it again. Okay. Do you see the photo? Yeah, you see the photo?
Yep.
Okay. So this is a photo of a village called Asir that, by the way, last week received all these houses of the village received home demolition orders. I mean, they're now slotted for demolition. This village is to be destroyed. As you see, the villages don't exist in the Israeli map, so there's no urban plan for the villages, and so therefore there is no way to build a house legally. You can't build a house legally. So when you don't build a house legally, you know it will be destroyed maybe at some point, and you don't want the government or the police, whoever's in charge of it, to come and destroy your house. So you build as modest as possible, as inexpensive as possible. And you can see the houses are made out of tin, corrugate, and also here. You can see the hay, which means that they have animals. There's some animals here. So they're still farming like they used to in the past. This is what they know how to do and know how to do well. And it also brings a person, of course, a person that does nothing as opposed to a person that works for his living is more respectful. And this kind of living of animal husbandry gives the person respect. Okay. I'll show you now another photo. As I said, these houses cannot receive building permits, and so therefore they are all illegal. And the worst consequence for that, the worst punishment, is the demolition of the houses. And I have been to too many times where houses were demolished. You can see the photo. This is during a demolition in the village of Atir. And to be in a place in which the government, the tractor belongs to the government, always is rented by the government. To be in a place in which you see houses upon houses, villages being destroyed and demolished, is extremely painful. This is governmental violence. Okay, so I'll go back to where I was beforehand. So the question is, why would you want to live in one of those tin houses? and not move into a town. Government wants you to move into a town. It's actually, by the way, it's also the government wants you to move into a town, but it's also empty words in the sense that there is no place in the town for you. Okay, so on the one hand, the government wants you to move into a town, but there is no place to move into. The Bedouin population had until 20 years ago, every woman had on the average 9 kids. So it's a population that's growing. It's going through the transition period. Every population goes through a transition period from having kids die of sickness to having enough health and sanitary conditions. And so this is the time that the Bedouins went through it. Now it's going down. It's about 5 children per woman. But it means that the population is growing very fast. And so many people in the towns need to build homes. They're now in their this is okay. They're in the towns. There's no place. I mean, the people of the town need every place that's available to build a new house. Okay, so government wants them to move into towns, but doesn't really exist as an option. But even if it did, people don't want to. Okay, I'm reading your messages. I'll try and stop and do what you're asking me to.
No, we can finish and then
I will. When I stop, I will do what you ask me to. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. There was an interesting study. There was one of the only studies that they did that compared children from the unrecognized villages and children from the cities and from Rahat and the towns. And it compared the health, okay? And death rates of babies. But mostly the health and nutrition and stuff like that. Now, if you live in a village, then your parents warm up your house using an open fire. If you live in a village, your mother cooks using an open fire. If you live in a village and your house is made out of tin, then it's extremely hot in the summer and very cold in the winter. Whereas if you live in a city, I mean, just the fact that the structure is better makes your life conditions a lot better. In the city, in the towns, you have public transport, which means that your parents can go to work, your mother can go and study, which doesn't exist. The government does not allow almost any public transportation into the villages. So you would expect when the Ministry of Health made this comparison between children born and brought up in the villages up to the age of 5 and in the towns, you would expect that there would be much more health with these children in the towns, right? They were the same. The health of the children in the villages and the health of the children in the towns was the same. And now you have to take into consideration that the children in the villages live in these corrugated houses or huts with open fire, with no roads, with parents that don't have access to public transport. And so you're asking yourself, what is wrong in the towns? Something is going on to put down the level of health of the children in the towns. And that is the misery. It is miserable. There is violence. The women, many of them are pushed into the houses. There is a destruction of the social fabric. There is the community had to give up its traditions and its culture because the physical space does not allow it to continue like that. I tried to explain. People are miserable, especially the mothers. In the villages, you have your sister, your neighbor, everybody can go and needs to visit everybody when these children are small. A lot of camaraderie among the women. In the town, you're stuck in the house. And so the kids suffer. The parents suffer. The kids suffer. So when you think, I'm an anthropologist. I've got this PhD with doing anthropology. It's fun. It's worth it. If you can do it, you do it too. But as an anthropologist, we're always taught to think to assume people are smart. and then try and understand the reasons that they do things. Okay, so there is no movement from the villages to the towns, certainly no free will movement. Okay, and it's because Israel created the towns and then neglected them. And so the villages with the horrendous home demolitions, with the lack of running, I mean, we have now running water, electricity. It's not pumped to every house, but it's pumped close enough to the house that the house can bring it, the people can bring it into their houses. There was no electricity. Now there's the solar panels. I remember when there were no phones because there were no cell phones. Okay, I'm old, but so we have communications, we have electricity, we have water, and we have the demolitions. The schooling is still bad. For example, although Israel passed a law that says you have compulsory free education from the age of 3, we don't have almost any preschools in the villages. And so most of the village children do not go to preschool and start the first time they come to a educational institution will be at the age of 6 and first grade. Okay, so that's horrible because it means you're sitting next to somebody who has already been for 3 years in preschool. And you start with such a deficit that there is a huge dropout from the 7th grade on. So it's not good. And it's actually quite bad with all the demolitions. But moving to the town is not a good solution either. What we're demanding, what they're demanding, what we want is allow the villages to exist, recognize them, and then plan them according to more or less what there is already, which will allow people to continue to move into this modernity in their own way, at their own pace, give good schools, give public transport, allow people to continue, those who did not receive education, to still make a living from animal husbandry and other agriculture. Just treat people as equal citizens or almost equal citizens. For you who have traveled to the south and seen these huts, okay, I'm sure some of you have. It seems like, my God, they're everywhere. What are they doing? But if we look at the use of land, okay, most of them, first of all, are farmers, okay, but if we look at the use of land and we compare Jewish rural living, because this is Negev, it's desert, okay? Jewish rural living, Jewish farming, and Bedouin farming, we find that the Bedouins use every Bedouin will use about 10% of what a Jewish person in the same kind of situation is. These houses, these huts that you see spread out, often have 30 people living inside a small hut. It's a lot of people there. So that's the request. And now what are we doing and how do we do it? I'll give you the example of water. Okay, so if we go back 6 years, not that long ago, maybe more, 8 years, many homes did not have access to water. And if they did, they paid about 4 times more than any other person in Israel. So what we did, this is going back now, 9 years, we went to the water beforehand. Okay, Israel changed its laws. In the past, you could buy water from Mekorot, the Israeli water company. And then the government decided that if you live in a town, you must, in any place, in a town, you must buy water from Ta'agid Mayim, from a water company, and not from Mekorot, because beforehand, the town itself sold the water. The municipality sold the water. People didn't pay for the water. There was a big mess. So the government decided to divide it. You pay municipal taxes to the town, but you pay for the water to the water company. Okay, so we're separating your water from your municipal taxes. Most of you weren't here around that time. It was about 15 years ago, 12 years ago. What happened was the government, in order to make it happen, hiked the price of water sold by Mekorot, by the Israeli water company. And so the Bedouins, as they don't belong to municipalities, suddenly the price of water for the poorest people in the country was the highest price. And because the water is not pumped into their homes, but rather they had to go and collect it from the main pipes, and there was never enough water taps for the people. So you always had, like a Bedouin shower you put water in a bowl, okay, and you take a cup, and this is how you have a shower. Okay, that's your shower if you're a Bedouin. Certainly don't think about watering any yards. Don't think about it. But you drink, you use water for cooking. You're very, very minimal in the water in your toilets, and you have a shower like I explained. And so we went to the water authority. We said, look, this is ridiculous. Come and see. So they did. I mean, they came and they saw and they decided that they want to try they wanted to change it. But we have it for the Bedouins have this Bedouin authority that's in charge of everything. And the Bedouin authority did not want the Bedouin to receive water in a better way, cheaper and more available. So they tried to stop it. So the water authority said, you know what, we'll do a pilot. So we helped them do a pilot. And then the water authority moved from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. And all the Tel Aviv people did not want to work in Jerusalem. So everybody quit and we had new people. So we went to Jerusalem. Hello, you have this pilot that you've started. Come and see. And we found good people. Okay, not people that love Arabs and love Bedouins, but they really hated this injustice. And they came to see and they saw what we're talking about. And they were smart about how to do it. They brought their legal people to come and see what's going on so that their legal people would not stop them from continuing this pilot. As part of the RCUV, at the time I was a volunteer, I wrote a letter to the water authority for every single family that wanted to move from Mekorot to the water company that was assigned for the Bedouins. So it meant I wrote probably a few thousand letters over the 3 years that we did it. Every family, we would go to the family, we would take the location, we would take a picture, we would take the papers, I would write the letter, they would receive the letter, okay, we have another one, and that was the only way we could get it done, but it got done. And nowadays, 90% or more of the people living in the villages don't have an issue with water anymore. Okay, so that's an example. We brought the same way, similar type of work. We brought public transportation to one village. We're trying to move it to a few more villages. Regarding how do you get villages recognized? It was Sharon who recognized the first 11, Ariel Sharon, okay? He realized I can't move, at least not these big villages, the historical villages. I have no way of moving these. We have 100,000 people living in the villages, more, 150,000. He said, okay, I'll recognize the big villages. We'll try and figure out what to do with the others later on. It's an ongoing process. We had a good government 4 or 5 years ago, right? Mansour Abbas, who is the one of the Arab parties, decided to join the coalition. He invited me. We had actually a Bedouin member of Knesset, Said al-Khoumi, that during his tenure, he died. And so Mansour Abbas said, I'll do it. And he asked me to come and help him with it. So I wrote, legal decisions and then I would give it to him. And he would pass it to Yair Lapid. And Yair Lapid said, look, this is my legal decision. I want this, not legal, but governmental decision. And that stopped too fast. So we got 4 villages recognized during the time of Mansour Abbas. We are praying that the next government will once more will include the Arab population, either Arab parties, either inside the coalition or as protecting the coalition from the outside, and that people will be willing to be just and end this 70 years of non-recognition. Allow the Bedouins to live there. It's good for everybody. It's really good for everybody. For example, there is a lot of criminal activity in the Palestinian Israeli population, horrible amount of criminal activity, violent criminal activity, that the police is not doing what it should and the government's not doing what it should to stop it. This criminal activity, it's mostly done by the mob, right? In the cities, in the Arab cities of the north. A little bit is being done in the Arab cities of the south, and nothing in the villages. The safest place for an Arab to live nowadays in Israel is in a Bedouin village. And why? Because of the culture, the structure of the society, the ability to maintain the strength of your community as a village. Okay, so instead of destroying it, let's keep it, let's strengthen it, let's give it its ability. The village itself, let's make it legal, let's recognize it, and let's plan it according to the needs of the Bedouin. This is something we're doing at the RCUV in order to show to the government this is how it should be done. And I'm done. Okay. So, shall I start with the questions that you guys gave?
Jenna,
Yeah, thanks a lot. It was an amazing talk. And I will start with the first question, which is in Russian, and I will translate it. So it's from Sasha, and he's thanking you for your talk. And his question is, what do you think? How Bedouins see Israel, and do they want to be a part of Israel? And what they accept from Israel, and what do they think about everything going on?
Thank you. If we go back to the beginning of Israel until the 1970s, the Bedouins did everything they could in order to be part of Israel. Many of the men volunteered to the Israeli army. They mostly worked as scouts, gashashim, because that's what they knew how to do. They were really good at it. They protected the borders. With the lack of recognition and the home demolitions, it's changing. Okay, the more demolitions there are, the more it changes. This new government, the one we've had for the last 3 years, has demolished not just homes, but has erased villages. It has erased already 4 villages. So that's like thousands or tens of thousands of people that have become homeless and are still homeless because there's no solution. So the more the government is violent and destructive towards the community, the more it's pushing the community away. But still, this most strong feeling within the most strong sentiment, the strongest sentiment inside the community is a wish to be part of Israel, much stronger than the other one. Okay, it is still there. There is still a hope and a request. Treat us, please, okay. We want to be here. We want to be part of Israel. That is the strongest sentiment. It is still the strongest sentiment. We saw it on October 7th. I am from the border of Gaza. My house is from, lived in Kisufim. Right now we're Mefunim, we're relocated to some little neighborhood of Karavilot. But the people who came, there were two kinds of people that came to rescue us. One was soldiers and people who were soldiers in their past, and they tried to come and help. And the other were Bedouin. The Bedouins sent car after car to bring people out of the Hamas area. The person that drove the bus that I was in under fire was a Bedouin. And they did it. They did it. Nobody asked them to. It was all voluntary. So there is a strong sentiment. Let us belong. But the more demolitions, the more destruction, the sentiment grows weaker.
Thank you. There is another question. What's going on with Bedouin communities in Jordan, Egypt, and are there any good cases and solutions that could be took into account for Israel?
The Egypt and Jordan are treating their Bedouins a lot better than Israel is. For example, Bedouins are allowed to live in traditional villages and have electricity brought to their houses in Jordan. And many of the Bedouin of Jordan are people that were kicked out of Israel. And they've received citizenship. They're called Sab'awis, like Beersheba people, because their ancestry is from us. But they're treated okay. They're not, some of them have become, for example, one is a member of parliament in Jordan, so you can climb up. But they don't have the destruction that our government does upon the Bedouins. In Egypt, they're not liked as much. Jordan has a huge, I mean, most of Jordan is Bedouin. Before, the ones that came out of the Negev and from the Jordanian ones are Bedouins too. So they fit in, they're okay. In Egypt, most of the country is not Bedouin. And so for them, they're like a poor minority, not one of us. But there's not the destruction that we have in Israel. So they're not like the intelligentsia or the rich people, but there's not destruction either. Was that
Yeah, and another question is about characteristic and tendencies for Galilee Bedouins.
Ask me again about the Galilee Bedouins.
What can you say about them? It has the same tendencies and how the state treats them.
In the Galilee, there was a head of a planning committee in the 1980s, I think, 70s, 80s. And they had the same thing. They had unrecognized villages, etc., etc. He said, this is ridiculous. And he recognized every single village in the Galilee. The last three were recognized later on in the 2000s. But it was a choice of one person to say, this is ridiculous. I don't want this. And since the Arab villages, the villages of the farmers were already planned because the houses were already built there. But the Bedouins ones, they were not built because they had lived in tents beforehand. So they were planned with the Bedouins. And the Bedouins in the Galilee, most of the soldiers who are Bedouins from the Galilee, although they're a much smaller group than the Bedouins in the Negev. They are distinct ethnic group. They speak slightly different Arabic, so Arabs can distinguish between them. But in the Galilee, they've become more and more Galilean, and they're not becoming much less Bedouin and much more Galilee Arabs, okay? But the fact that the government of Israel decided, or there was one person that said, this is ridiculous, and changed the Galilee. In the Negev, we have never had someone that decent. And not only that, right now, the head of the planning committee of the Negev is somebody who is very, very, very far right. He says in the meetings that I'm there too, when I finish my job, I'm going to join you guys in Im Tirtzu or Regavim or the very far right organizations. So he's not just religious, he's religious with a very strong ideology of Arabs are better not in Israel. And if they have to be in Israel, let's put them into concentration towns. So that is a huge difference just by chance.
And there is another question that I think you partly answered to this. So the question is, how did you legalize the settlements? What helps go into court or lobby at the Knesset? What works better?
When you have a struggle for rights, this is true, just a general idea, okay? When you have a struggle for rights, you need to change your tactics or your strategies all the time. So we did go to courts successfully in the 1990s. When I say successfully, the government of Israel wanted to put a school for the children of Bir Hadaj 20 kilometers away from the village. They took this issue to court. The court said to the government, to the Ministry of Education, don't be ridiculous, put the school where it should be. Okay? So, and because the school was there, it was easier afterwards to receive recognition for this village of Bir Hadaj. So in the past, the courts were with us, but these things shift and the courts are not with us anymore. And so right now we try not to go to court if we can. And then we had this window of opportunity with lobbying that was very powerful because we had this Arab party as part of the coalition. So for 2 years, it was really, really helpful, and we could do things. The other thing that we do is we really search for the one or two people who are in the bureaucracy high up, and we try to bring to them the issues and see how much they can help. Like with the water story. I'm hoping that the Minister of Education changed the person in charge, and we're trying to see if we can really bring, so far not successfully, we want them to open the daycare, the preschools. Okay, it's a big deal, and put I didn't speak at all about the war, but when you're not allowed to build a house, then you can't also build a safe room. And so the most vulnerable population in the country, when there is a war that includes missiles, and there's all the time eventually, and we've had so many wars that include missiles, that you and your family are going to have no way to protect yourself. And so in our country, in Israel, we have like these 3 levels of protection. One is do it for yourself, okay? These Bedouin can't, because if they build anything, it'll be demolished. Not only will the safe room be demolished, but if they put something there, but probably their house will be demolished as well. So there's been all sorts of secret ways of doing it. So, for example, one of my friends showed me in his hut, he took one of the rooms and in the inside of it, he put fortified cement in them. So he's got a safe room. And another friend showed me that he dug a serious cave, and that's where his family is protecting himself. But not everybody can do that, and most people can't. So that's the personal level. The second level is the level of the municipality. And as I said, these villages don't exist. They don't have a municipality. So the second level, in which your town is the one that gives you miklatim, the bomb shelters, doesn't exist. And then you go to the third level. We went to the Supreme Court. We're saying, look, we're not allowed to build shelters. We have no municipality. Make the government in charge. Nah, you should build your own shelters. So this is the government telling the courts they should build their own. And the court said, okay, so build your own, but we're not allowed to build our own. So that's, I didn't know how I got to that answer, but that was an answer of something that we didn't talk about.
Yeah, it's thank you for telling the story about shelters, because we talked about shelters a lot, because a lot of residents of the country don't have a protected space, but in Bedouin community, I think the problem is like huge. And
what they did when there was we had those 10 minutes, they would throw everything they had into the car, the babies, the old mother, everything into the car, and drive to the closest place where there is like a wadi under the road. So the road is got like this little bridge over the wadi, and everybody would go there, and if you get to that little wadi space under the road, it'll be already full. You'll have to go look for the next one. And it is so scary when you know that you have no way to protect your children and your parents and whatever.
There is some other questions. Could you tell more about local Bedouin initiatives and projects? What are the main activities, and what do they do, like preserving traditional way or resisting demolitions, like any type of activism?
Okay. Well, first of all, I'm Jewish, but the organization I work for is Bedouin. So the head of the RCUV is elected. We try and emulate what happens in the regional councils in Israel. We had our last elections last week or 2 weeks ago. And so my boss is an elected person. Every village has a committee, and all these committee heads, they come and they vote for the head of the RCUV. Okay. So it's an elected body, and I am the professional that's supposed to run it. So he's the elected person. So that's something that people do. I mean, when you ask what do you do, also working to strengthen the leadership, okay, to make sure that there is a village that knows who to go to and who to complain to. And there's a person who knows me, like from the RCUV downwards, the Regional Council of the Unrecognized Villages, RCUV. Like we had two amazing demonstrations against the destruction of villages, not just demolitions of homes. These were the two biggest demonstrations that were like last month, ever since October 7th. I mean, to be able to bring out to the streets tens of thousands of people, okay, that's something big. And especially since the Bedouin are, as Palestinians or as Arabs in Israel, they will receive a much worse treatment from the police and from the courts. And so to be brave enough to go out in so many numbers to the streets was good. There is women's initiatives, beautiful women's initiatives. For example, embroidery, and a different one is weaving. The tent was woven. It was a traditional woman's activity. She wove the tent all summer long. She would weave a patch, and then when it was ready, she would add it to the tent, so the tent would grow and always had a fresh, newer patch. And so there's a women's organization, or Bedouin women's organization called Sidri, that's located in Lakia. I think if you want to Google, it's women's weaving or Bedouin women weaving, or Lakia with the, I don't know if it's a K or a Q. And they use that traditional craft to give women employment at home, and they create rugs to put on walls, to put on the floor, that have been given the prize of the best rugs in the Middle East. And the problem when you buy one is it never grows old. You can never buy a new one instead of it. And then there is embroidery. I don't know, can you see this? No, let me show you. Hold on, I'll take off the, where is it? Hold on. Embroidery. Everything I have is embroidered. This one. So there's these you can buy at the women's embroidery place. It's called women embroidery, Bedouin embroidery. Again, it's to provide women with income doing what they know how to do and what they do beautifully. These women's organizations also try and help women get employment in other ways, like gardens, selling what's it called? Za'atar, the za'atar leaves, or the za'atar as a proper spice. So there is stuff going on. The Bedouin, many of them still grow sheep. If you want to come during the season, you can go and just see a Bedouin in a tent and go join them. I mean, they're part of the culture is you're welcome. So they'll like it. Just feel free to walk in.
There is two more questions, Sasha. Do we have?
We also have to finish and
Yeah.
let Yaëla go. It's late, but probably, yeah, let me see the question. Probably the question, the last question, probably the short answer. It's what do you think the Israeli government, especially now, so stubbornly pursues demolition and destruction of Bedouin villages in the south? Is it pure racism or something else?
No, it's more than racism. For Ben Gvir, who is in charge of the whole process of deciding what house to demolish and then going and demolishing, he's in charge of the whole process. He made sure that after he became in charge of the police, he also made sure that he got to be in charge of the place that decides who to demolish. Okay, so he's in charge of everything. And he uses his when he demolishes a village, he comes and shows off, look what I did. Aren't I wonderful? Aren't I great? I am bringing law and order to the Negev. Okay, so the word they use in Hebrew is called meshilut, meaning law and order, more or less. And for him, he's using it to get to get brownie points, to get more people to vote for him afterwards. But it's so skewed because destroying will bring about more harm for everybody in the area. You can't. The Bedouin nowadays are somewhere between 1/3 and 1/2 of the population of the Negev. So you can't be so aggressive and harmful to such a huge minority and not expect it to eventually overflow. And so he's doing the exact opposite of law and order. Law and order would be bring daycares, recognize the villages, bring preschools, bring clinics, let them have their own municipality, a real one. Instead, he's destroying the houses, but for him, it gives him the way he presents it is, I am the sheriff of the Negev. I am so great. I am so powerful. I am destroying villages. So that's what's going on. It's racist, but it's more than that.
Thank you, Yaëla.
Thank you, guys. Thank you so much. I hope you've learned. I hope that you, like me, learn to enjoy such a wonderful culture that is part of Israel. There are places, just look for Bedouin hospitality, come down. There's places you can stay at, and they love it. They love hosting you. So thank you.